So what was sort of your moment? What's that whole beginning to how you started, and how old were you when you started?
So growing up in the 80s, if you're a film genre buff, 80s ninja movies are freaking a genre in of itself, and they're phenomenal. So I grew up watching every single 80s ninja movie that you could possibly think of. Pray for Death, Revenge of the Ninja. Sho Kosugi was like my hero back then. Obviously Bruce Lee as well. You know, I watched all the old school 70s Bruce Lee movies as well. But I was just drawn to the whole ninja aura, you know. Every ninja movie had a scene where they laid out all the weapons when they were getting ready to go to battle, you know, and you're just like going over the shuriken and the nunchucks and all that kind of stuff, the ninja toe. So that was just nostalgia for me, and as a kid I was just drawn to it. And then when I was probably around 10 years old, the Kuksul Master Ha, they did a demonstration at the park across the street from my parents' house, and we didn't know what was going on. We just saw this commotion over at the park, and I told my mom, I was like, I want to go check it out, I want to go check it out. So we go over there, and it's Kuksul doing a demonstration, Master Ha doing his thing. Master Ha was, you know, young back then and very impressive. He did his signature, you know, backflip in the glass, rubbing the glass all over his face and his body, and just, you know Master Ha, so he's just like, he's an impressive individual. So, you know, I was instantly drawn to it, and I, you know, begged my parents to take me down to the studio and sign up, and I started doing Kuksul back then at about 10 years old. Mike, we were good friends since elementary school. You know, he started soon after that, and we just kind of grew up through martial arts together under Master Ha.
Was he in your same cul-de-sac too?
No, he lived down the street, closer to the grocery store that was down the street from my house.
Okay, but he was part of kind of that group where you guys would like invent shit to do and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was interesting because, you know, there was a bunch of people on our cul-de-sac that were younger than me. My brother's 3 years younger than me. Mm-hmm. My brother didn't have most of the other kids didn't have any inclination towards martial arts or fantasy and any of that type of stuff. And so I had Mike and me and a couple other kids. That was like one of my group's friends, and we'd play role-playing games, and we would train, and we'd go basically do parkour before parkour was parkour. We'd be climbing up trees and jumping out of trees, running across roofs and doing flips and stuff like that. And then the other side was just like athletes. You know, my brother and all the kids on the block, we would play football, baseball, hockey, street hockey, all that kind of stuff, soccer, nonstop. So if I wasn't hanging out with Mike and the, you know, martial arts crew or that type of scene, I was doing sports and just hanging out with like the athlete kids, you know. So it was a good outlet, you know. Always had something to do.
So going back to when you first started training with Master Ha, what was your experience training under him? He was your first instructor, and you were a kid, so you had nothing else to compare it to. But, you know, especially now looking back, you know, what was that experience like training under him? He's a special guy, and what was that training like as well?
At first, being, you know, 10 years old, walking into the studio, a bunch of older students there, obviously, you know, more experienced than myself, it was very intimidating. I was a really shy kid at that time. I was probably shy all the way up until middle of high school, even though I was training martial arts through my teen years and stuff like that. Just my nature, I guess. But it was very intimidating. But after, you know, I told myself this is something I really want to do, so I leapt in there, and, you know, even though I was, you know, intimidated and maybe a little bit afraid, I just jumped in and started doing what I could do. And Master Ha doesn't let up, you know, he's pretty hardcore, even when you're young. So, you know, we would be getting yelled at before class. You know, Master Ha would say, you need to create energy, make energy, and he'd like tell us to jump around and start stretching and do all kinds of stuff like that, do push-ups and stuff. So we were doing all that kind of stuff, and I just followed along, and then we'd stretch. And they had, you know, I remember them being like 3-ring binder like sheets, like cut like the 3-ring binder sheets off of the binder, and they'd put them under your feet. Mike says they were like, what did he say? They were like X-ray sheets or something like that. I can't remember. But anyway, it's like a plastic sheet, right? And you would have to put those under your feet and do the splits, and then Master Ha would come around and stand on your hips. And you would just be in pain, dude. It was freaking, it was painful and awesome at the same time, you know? I mean, I I chalk it up to the fact that I come from a generation where I got disciplined by my parents. I got spanked with a belt, you know, I got yelled at. I got disciplined, which doesn't happen anymore for kids these days. Training martial arts is much in the same way. Martial arts is not only about self-discipline, but it's about being disciplined by your master when you fuck up, you know what I mean? Or when you don't have the drive to push yourself, your master's there to freaking tell you. It's like drill sergeant, right? Tell you, you got to get this done. Why are you slacking? You know, stuff like that. So I didn't know it probably at that age, but I grew up all through the rest of my life really loving that disciplined environment where, you know, I could go to a class that had, whether it was martial arts or whatever, I could go to a martial arts class that had a master or an instructor that would hold you accountable. Or I could play team sports, like I was playing hockey my whole life. And the coach, if we screwed up in a game or we lost the game and we played like shit, the coach is there at the next practice screaming at you, making you skate ladder drills and all kinds of stuff. And I just loved that, you know? I loved that discipline and being held accountable and the work that came along with it, you know, the conditioning and improving your body, improving your coordination, improving your self, so to speak. So